This is the Palin Update on Mama Grizzly Radio. I'm Kevin Scholla in the 3D Security and Training Academy studios.
When the people fear their government, there's tyranny. But when government fears the people, there's freedom.
Grassroots movements, the way to combat a lawless administration, bumbling bureaucrats, and a bought and paid for media. We've promoted Convention of States, American Grizzlies United, and other top organizations that are for the people on this program. Today, the man in charge of a pivotal group, Frederick Douglass Republicans. He's here. KCarl Smith joins us in just a moment. Sarah Palin hits hard on the VA, Obama, and ISIS, and praises a country music legend. A brand new installment of Liberty and Legacy with Tamara Colbert is on the way from Texas, and just ahead our latest edition of Steel Resolve with Sarah Steelman of Missouri. Welcome to the Palin Update on Mama Grizzly Radio. The Palin Update is sponsored by 3D Security and Training Academy. Learn more at 3dsta.com. First up, a really exciting guest by the name of KCarl Smith. He is president and founder of Frederick Douglass Republicans, and he's making an incredible difference, not only by advancing liberty, but by giving others the tools and techniques to do the same. And right now we do welcome KCarl Smith to the Palin Update on Mama Grizzly Radio. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you for the invite.
Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And we'd really like to know more, and I know our listeners certainly would, about what you're up to in this great group that you're involved in. You're the president and founder of Frederick Douglass Republicans, among other things that we mentioned earlier, all of your accomplishments. You're a best-selling author, and most importantly, a former U.S. Army officer. We thank you for the service to our country. But let's talk a little bit here about Frederick Douglass Republicans. First, tell folks, what is the group?
Well, Frederick Douglass Republicans, we are a grassroots conservative organization, and based on the life and power and values of Frederick Douglass, we have about right now close to 100,000 people across the country who have gone through our training, and they also identify themselves as a Frederick Douglass Republican in lieu of saying conservative. And to become a Frederick Douglass Republican is not based on a person's color or their ethnicity. Is based on someone who embraces the four life empowering values of Douglass. And these are the four life empowering values that allowed him to rise from slavery to a statesman and being born below poverty to prosperity. So number one, respect for the U.S. Constitution. Number two, respect for life. Number three, the belief in the limited power of government. And four, the belief in personal responsibility. So it's not about color, it's about values.
And do you find that through your group, a lot of times it's not about color, but being about values, you are able to access some people that maybe you wouldn't otherwise because, you know, people hear the term Republican, for instance, or even conservative in some circles, and, you know, because of media spin or whatever reason you want to say, you know, people may be turned off by that. But when you talk about just values and core beliefs, and then, you know, your title is Frederick Douglass Republicans, I think that gets people involved more. Have you found that? Most
definitely. You hit it right on the head. And the word Republican, the word conservative, and even the word Tea Party, as you mentioned, those words are, because of propaganda and spin, those words are not the language of liberty, especially in minority communities. They are the language of oppression. So when you go into these communities, you want to engage, and you start using those words, the wall will go up, and people will ignore you. It's not that they disagree with us; they ignore us. So the Frederick Douglass Republican mantra, if you will, is a way on how to engage anybody about your conservative values without the fear of them calling you a racist or a sellout, and you start changing hearts and minds and inspiring people to join the ranks of the conservative movement, or better still, the Frederick Douglass Republican movement.
Wow, you know, what a great point you make there. Forget about someone being against you. They've ignored you, so they don't even hear what you have to say. And, I mean, without that, how could you get anybody, right?
Yeah, that's something as conservatives we have to understand, that we must master the language of liberty. And master the language of liberty is being able to speak a universal language of liberty that resonates with all Americans. And that language of liberty, that lexicon is Frederick Douglass, Republican. And Frederick Douglass is the great icon and patriotic hero that we have to help us engage anybody and start sharing these conservative values, because this is a center-right nation.
And you talk about the language of liberty and also where you talk about it, right? I mean, Governor Palin has talked so much of late and in the past few years about infiltrating pop culture and getting out there and talking to folks that maybe a traditional establishment Republican may have ignored in the past, or may say, oh, well, they lean left, so we won't even talk there. I mean, why should you do that? At least if you go in and talk to people, and if you get 2 people out of a group of 1,000, you got 2 people.
And you know what? I think Gallup poll after Gallup poll tells us that most Americans identify themselves as conservatives. So if that's the case, then all we got to do is start engaging them and start sharing these values with them. But we got to do it without using the word conservative, because that word is being demonized by the left. So we're being outplayed when it comes to propaganda. That's what we need to understand. We don't have a message problem as conservatives. We have a messaging problem. So we need to understand how to master that language of liberty, and that's Frederick Douglass.
And meantime, you have people who are on the fringe and on the left, but they have such a loud microphone that those that may not be savvy as far as how the media is handled, they think that a lot of people who look a certain way or live in certain places think that way, because all they hear night and day is, say, Al Sharpton, for example.
Exactly right. So we feel as conservatives, we feel that we're being outnumbered, and we feel discouraged, and that's not the case. We actually outnumber them. But we got to, like I said, we got to. I think the number one battle facing conservatives is this whole thing about diversity and inclusion. But we got to figure out how to do it. And with our organization, we developed and put into practice what we call the Frederick Douglass methodology of engagement, where we teach conservatives how to engage. That's something we have not been able to do very well. We're always on the defense, but we need to be on the offense all the time.
What I found to be one of the most frustrating things when you try to talk to folks is if you take names out of it, say Obama, for example, and you just talk about issues. You'll go to a church group or you'll go to an inner city group, and you'll find that almost everybody there is pro-life. They're pro-traditional marriage. They're pro-family. And then they say, I voted for Obama twice. And you walk out, scratching your head, saying, well, wait a minute, this guy's against all these things you just talked about, and yet you're on board here, going with what was pushed by the media, pushed by the left, pushed by Hollywood. How do you crack into that as far as, we talk about getting that language out there? What are the specifics? How can we reach more people and, just open that door to even let them not ignore so they can hear what we're really talking about?
I think the first thing that we need to do is not so much talk about issues, but talk about values and get people to understand that the values that you possess should be the guiding principle, the guiding factor in how you vote and how you side on an issue. Or in other words, the way we vote on an issue is based on the values we have and that we live by. So it's the values piece that unites us. And what unites us, all Americans, is this whole deal about liberty. That's the big value button that we should be pushing. And so with that being the case, then we should be able to engage anybody talking about liberty. Everybody wants liberty. Nobody wants the government or the slave government to rule their life. So it's the idea of speaking that language of liberty, and that language of liberty must entail, it must embrace an understanding of conservatives. We just can't use certain words, because once we do that, we're being shut off, we're being demonized, we're being attacked, and we lose the ability to take control of the narrative.
Former Florida Congressman Alan West, a veteran like yourself and a friend of this program, one group that he's really exposed over the years is the NAACP, talking about where things really stand there compared to some of the propaganda or the way the media machine spins it. I love a story about you with the NAACP about someone who made a comment about you after reading your book. Could you tell us about that?
Well, this is a upper executive of the NAACP 3 years ago, got a copy of the book, read the book, and got the information back to me through my brother. And this person said, if the information get in your book, KCarl, gets on a national level, this is 2011, and he said, if the information in your book gets on a national level, the Democrat Party is toast, and Obama is history. And this individual is covertly in the Frederick Douglass Republican movement.
And is this, I mean, obviously this person wants to be anonymous, and we respect that, but is it...
most definitely, because they're still with NAACP. They're still getting paid, so they haven't come out of the closet yet, so to speak.
So when you say covertly, is it because they are almost, doing an undercover operation here, or is it because they're afraid of the backlash?
They're afraid of the backlash. They're afraid to go through the humiliation.
Isn't that unbelievable?
But, it is, but because their income is tied to this, and I can understand that.
I mean, you hear it every day. I mean, I get enough flack myself as a white Christian male, but I mean, you look at, when blacks, when Jews, when women, like Governor Palin or, Alan West, for instance, a black man who goes out there and talks like this, and the backlash you have to get for talking about, like what you just said, values, traditional American values, the Constitution, a great man like Frederick Douglass, and you're slammed for it.
Yeah, I used to be slammed for it when I used to identify myself as a black conservative or a black Republican. Mm-hmm. But since I've been identifying myself and using Frederick Douglass Republican, I don't get slammed for that. Because what happens when you say Frederick Douglass Republican, that's an oxymoron.
Right.
Douglass is an icon of liberty,
right.
And because we lose the propaganda battle, Republican an icon of racism, liberty racism. So when you say Frederick Douglass Republican, when you make that statement, you create a mystery in the person's mind, and they want to know, what do you mean by that? And that's when you take control of the narrative and start changing hearts and minds. Yeah, things are different now. By using this Frederick Douglass Republican and this whole mantra of engagement, methodology of engagement is a powerful concept.
It makes me think of Alveda King, who another friend of the program here, who's been on here to talk about her uncle, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., here many times, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I know people like to leave that Reverend part out there, especially the left. But you see people who try to claim, Dr. King, especially during his holiday, and they just burn up when they see conservatives and those with the traditional American values, just lauding Martin Luther King, and really they don't understand, and I guess maybe the same could be said for, say, a Frederick Douglass in different ways, but really these are folks who had the values that are being talked about not by the left, not at all, but by you.
It's exactly right, and what the left tries to do, and they're very, very good at it, they will co-opt Frederick Douglass. They will co-opt Dr. King, and they will rewrite history in order to make their point palatable in people's mind and be acceptable. They actually lie about history. They're good at it.
Yeah, I'd say they're great at it. It's you don't have to be great. It doesn't mean you're doing a good thing, right? But they are masters.
Yeah.
That's why with Obama, I can't stand when, and we saw it from McCain and Romney, unfortunately, people who ran against him, when the over his head or that he doesn't know what he's doing. I never like that argument because I disagree. I think he knows. He told us fundamentally transform America, and he's a smart guy. He just happens to be a far left European academic. Community organizer and very smart to move this country to the left.
And I agree with you. He's not failing in terms of his presidency. This policy that he has proved, they are working. That's the intent. You're exactly right.
That's right. Wow.